Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining the Early Childhood Colorado Partnership December Lunch and Learn, our last Lunch and Learn of 2015. Today we'll be talking about policy and advocacy work in the partnership and beyond. And before I jump in and provide a little background on our agenda for today, just want to let everybody know that everybody is on mute and will remain on mute aside from our presenters for the duration of the Lunch and Learn today. Since we have lots of participants, it's always hard to manage background noise and that kind of thing. But there is on your dashboard for GoToMeeting, there should be a question box where you can pop in questions at any time. We're leaving time for questions at the end, but you can pop in your question at any time. We'll make sure to answer it at the end of the meeting. So today, just to give you a little bit of background of what we'll be sharing and who will be on the Lunch and Learn today, we'll start off with Stephanie Monahan from here at the Civic Canopy supporting the Early Childhood Colorado Partnership, and she will provide a little bit of background on the policy work that's been emerging throughout the partnership and throughout 2015 for the partnership, highlighting some of the work of the partnership's policy action team. And then I'll have JC Montoya Price, who's the engagement coordinator at the Colorado Children's Campaign, provide a brief advocacy training for us and give us some tips on advocacy. And then Sarah Barnes, the policy analyst from the Children's Campaign, will provide a background and preview on the upcoming 2016 legislative session, the state legislative session, which will begin in early January. So very busy time for them coming up. So I will start by handing it over to Stephanie, who will provide a little bit of background on the partnership's policy work.
Great, thank you, Hannah, and thank you all for being with us today. We're very excited to be able to offer Lunch and Learns that hopefully will contribute to your work at your individual organizations and communities, as well as support our work through the partnership. So thank you all for joining us today. A little bit of background on the Early Childhood Colorado Partnership policy work. We do have a policy action team that, as you can see from the screen, has emerged from our ongoing efforts and conversations that really blossomed out of the Raising of America documentary series, but is in line with our vision and values for changing systems and infrastructure to better support early childhood. So this is definitely an area of focus, not only for the partnership, but probably for many of you in your work as well. And to that end, we are having lots of conversations at the policy action team, as well as with other system leads, systems initiatives throughout the partnership, thinking specifically about the Colorado Children's Campaign and their policy work, as well as Georgie's work with Essentials for Childhood, recognizing that our primary goal is to be mutually reinforcing and not duplicate efforts. So we're spending we're planning on spending a lot of time in January really mapping out the early childhood policy landscape and really identifying where can the Early Childhood Colorado Partnership Action Team play a role, what else is happening so that we can do a better job of connecting folks based on area of interest, passion, and priority, whether it's around breastfeeding work, family-friendly business policies, etc., so that, again, we can do a better job of helping folks connect where it makes sense and where they can really help move the work forward. So you'll see a lot of activity in early 2016 to that end. We have had conversations about merging work groups and action teams so that we can, again, break down those silos and be working in better concert together. As you can see, we've been thinking about our policy work in kind of a twofold complementary arena, thinking about big P policy, legislative activities, but also thinking about little p policy, organizational, community policy changes. And so we'll be getting getting a lot clearer on how our action team will be supporting that work here in Colorado moving forward. And again, we'll aligning a lot of our work around our systems building efforts and the essentials for childhood, and working with key partners like the Colorado Children's Campaign and EPIC and many others, the Children's Hospital of Colorado, and many others who are working kind of at both levels of policy as well. So very excited to continue to drive that work forward to benefit all of you in the partnership.
Great. Thanks, Stephanie. So we are next going to pass it on to JC Montoya Price of the Children's Campaign, and we're working a little bit, we might have some technical difficulties for just a moment, so you might have to just give us just a moment to try to figure out the audio from our end, so apologies for the pause. Just give us just a minute.
Okay, thanks for dealing with our technical difficulties. Can you hear me? This is JC Montoya Price.
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. Technology is working, kind of.
So slides for you, but just say slide forward or whatever you want to say, and I'll make sure things move forward. So welcome, JC. You can get started.
Okay, and we have bandwidth issues, so if I get jumbled, please let me know. But thank you. Sarah and I are both excited to be here to talk to you all about both big P policy and little p policy. Hannah has told us that you have a variety of initiatives planned, so I'm going to talk both about the legislative process, but also other ways to be an effective advocate. And for me, the reason I believe in advocacy and really try to get everyone I know to speak up and make their voices heard is that I've seen how effective it can be. The best example I always use is a group of young women from Yuma, Colorado in the Estrellas program who were the most fierce advocates I've seen because they were young but they had training to be effective advocates. They were able to use tactics maybe that some of us wouldn't feel comfortable with, such as cornering Cory Gardner outside of the restroom. But I think their work and others in that area helped Cory Gardner to change his position on in-state tuition for undocumented students. So we know that we can make a difference this way. So I'll cover 3 pillars of advocacy, which is one way of looking at the issue. Lobbying versus advocacy. I know that a lot of nonprofits and government agencies are very concerned about crossing that line and doing something that they feel like they're not allowed to do. I'll share some tips on how to advocate effectively, and then I'll end with some resources. And thank you. So this is a concept that was raised by Nancy and Mady, and that there's 3 pillars of advocacy, and without any of them, obviously, the stool would fall. So decision makers maybe is the one that we're most used to using. That's going to the legislature and talking to legislators. It's talking to business owners and asking them to change their policies on breastfeeding or family leave policies. And it just depends on the issue if you're going to the legislature or the school board or business leaders. There's the media leg, which overlaps quite a bit in modern times with community because of social media. But under media, we include more traditional forms of media, like letters to the editor of the newspaper, as well as social media and some of the newer forms of communication. And then finding the community is what we all probably do every day, talking to friends and neighbors about the issues that matter most to us and trying to create some momentum to get people, a stronger group of people speaking out on the same issues. Next slide, please. So I think the next couple slides are just showing you different types of advocacy. So under decision making, we see online petitions and action alerts, meeting one-on-one or going to town hall meetings, testifying at the legislature or at a city council meeting, doing snail mail type letters, making phone.
We might have lost you, Jason.
What'd you say, Hannah?
You might have faded out for just a couple seconds, but we have you back. And I can hear you now.
Okay, but we're back now. So the online petitions and action alerts we all probably sign once a day tend to be less effective and less persuasive than more intensive activities like making an actual phone call or writing a letter. And so that's an important thing to keep in mind as you're trying to put together a strategy to impact policy. The next slide, I think, gives some media examples, like the letters to the editor.
So there might be a little delay on our end.
Oh, that's the community one. So community. The community aspect could be a house party or special event that you plan to educate people on the issues that matter to you. It can be something small like a coffee where you're trying to build support on an individual level. And then the next slide is the media, which covers both traditional and more, creative forms such as a flash mob or a video, ways to get attention. We've seen social media how viral things like a flash mob, people dancing on the steps of the Capitol, which is on the next slide, can really help to create more momentum and interest in the issues that you're dealing with. I tell people, and you can move to the next slide, that they are the experts, and I think that sometimes but really, we're all experts in the issues that we live on a day-to-day basis, and just like Colorado Matters is always looking for experts to share a new perspective on issues. Legislators and other decision makers are doing the same. So it's important to tell your story, to tell and put a face on the numbers that legislators might see. Really explain the life of a specific child and how they benefit from access to the Colorado Child Care Assistance Program. Sorry, I got distracted by technology again. And so the narrative and the story, especially for you all who are working kind of on the front lines of the work, is the most important aspect. They can get data and figures from people like us, and they kind of get sick of it. What they want to see are really everyday constituents, people who are their customers, who can make to sway their opinions. The next slide just is kind of some of those reminders that each of our voices matter, and that we really can have an impact on the issues that face children in Colorado. I love the quote, if you think you're too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito. Each of us individually and powerfully in partnerships like Early Childhood Colorado Partnership can really shift things in a way that might not otherwise be anticipated. We'll go into lobbying versus advocacy. It's helpful to think of advocacy as kind of an umbrella under which different activities fall. So all lobbying is advocacy. You're definitely advocating anytime you're lobbying, but you can also do advocacy that isn't lobbying. So if you work for a government agency or a nonprofit who's uncomfortable with policy advocacy specifically, know that there are a lot of other actions you can take and still have an impact on the process. So the next slide gives an example of what advocacy is, and this does not count as lobbying. So providing factual information, sharing stories about the impacts of programs, building awareness, just having a legislator or another decision maker go on a tour of your facility so they can better understand what you do for children and families can have a big impact. So anytime you're telling a legislator how a funding source or program has affected you and the people you serve, or any data that you would share, such as our Kids Can data, would be considered considered advocacy and would not be subject to any limits on lobbying. The next slide kind of explains more specifically what lobbying is, and it's, again, a specific action on a proposed bill. So anytime you say, hey, Senator Aguilar, please vote yes on Senate Bill 12, that is lobbying, and that crosses the line that nonprofits are allowed to cross, but each organization has a different comfort level with how much lobbying is done. You know, the Children's Campaign is a policy advocacy organization. We do quite a bit of lobbying as well as other types of advocacy. Nonprofits are allowed to do various percentages of lobbying, but I also know that lots of executive directors and program directors get really uncomfortable with that idea because they don't understand it often. So later on in the slide presentation, you'll have a couple of resources that you can go to that'll explain more in depth that division between lobbying and advocacy and how to kind of navigate it. And there's agencies, including the Colorado Nonprofit Association, who really encourage nonprofits and see it as a responsibility for nonprofits to speak up and impact policy as part of our service to the public. The next slide is kind of the same message of you're the expert. Anyone can advocate. You don't have to be a citizen. You don't have to be a certain age. You don't have to be a registered voter. Anyone who has an experience working in childcare or any of the programs the legislature discusses. Anyone who's had a kid and not gotten paid time off in order to bond with their child. We all have stories to share that can help to change hearts and minds, which is ultimately what we're trying to do. Legislators and other decision makers, I think, like to believe that they're very pragmatic and very fact-based in their decision making, but what we know is that it's the stories, it's the personalized, putting a face to the program that really ultimately has a better and a bigger impact. Some effective advocacy tips, some of them kind of seem like common sense, just being a polite person and engaging in ways that are productive. But I think it's an important reminder that really all kinds of advocacy is about building relationships. Not agree with a decision maker on every issue, but you may need them on certain issues to speak up and be maybe the deciding vote. So never burning bridges, always remembering it's about building relationships, and this is a good place to think, let's agree to disagree if you do disagree with decision makers, because again, you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot basically by closing doors. So again, personalized stories will definitely have an impact. You shouldn't attack, criticize, or threaten. I think especially with legislators, but also with other types of decision makers, it's tempting to say, we voted you into office, we can vote you out. And that's very true, but at the same time, it creates an adversarial relationship with that decision maker that is not going to help you in the long run. If you don't know something, you should say so. It's very much worse to make something up and then have to correct yourself, or then ruin your credibility. Someone may ask a question that you don't have the answer to, but it's a great relationship building opportunity. You can say, hey, I don't know that, but I will follow up with you, and it's that follow-up that can be really impactful and really help you make a mark. Especially at the state level, but also at the national level, there's so many issues that our decision makers deal with. There's very few that they can be experts in. So they do rely on organizations like ours, organizations like yours, people on the front lines to really give them the factual information that can help them make better decisions. More tips for effective advocacy is refining and rehearsing your talking points. This is true for visits with legislators who tend to be super busy and don't have a lot of time to actually sit down and have a long conversation with constituents about their issues. You can move to the next slide, please, Hannah. But it's also true when you're working with the media. We know that typically you'll have, just a couple of seconds to get your point across. And while it usually feels kind of silly to practice, I'm a strong believer in role-playing because actually trying to say something, is a lot different than thinking it through in your head or writing it down on a piece of paper. Fact sheets are really impactful. Anytime you're working with the legislature, you want to have something you can leave behind with them so that they'll remember what you talked about and so they can follow up with you. There's other creative ways of doing that. Here you see an image of our kids countdown calendar. So we have different facts for every day of the legislative session to remind the legislature that we're there as a resource and to keep ourselves in front of them. I've seen another great resource. I have it hanging on my bulletin board from one of the early childhood councils that's like a calendar that tells you different tips by day or by month on how to ensure your child is school ready. Resources like that people keep around them can really have a big impact in kind of keeping you in their mind. Don't use technical terms or acronyms. As someone who's new to the early childhood world, I don't think this is a problem that's unique to you all at all, but there's so many EC somethings, ECCP, ECLA, all of those, that even for someone who hears these things every day, it can be a little confusing, but certainly for legislators who may only have a passing knowledge about what CCCAP is, avoiding the acronyms as much as possible is important because people won't always ask you to explain what it is. And maintaining communication, similar to the kids countdown calendar where you have something that's there with them all the time, following up, letting them know any progress that was made on your issue, any additional facts that come up, because it is about maintaining communication. Advocacy should never be seen as a one-time thing, like, okay, we went and met with them, now we're done. It should always be seen kind of as a continuum that includes multiple touch points between meeting face-to-face, making phone calls, email, letters, exciting things like calendars that can help people to remember you as a resource. On the next slide, we have some other effective advocacy tips. Getting involved in the process as early as possible is essential. This is true of the legislature, but it's also true of any other kind of decision-making process. If you're there at the table from the outset, you can have a deeper impact than if you go to the final hearing at the legislature where the decisions have already been made. Right now is when all the legislators and all the policy wonks like Sarah are thinking about what are those bills that are going to be proposed. So if you wait until January when the legislative session starts, it's already a little bit too late often to get your bill into the process. So speaking up early and often is a great way to ensure you can have a bigger impact. Collaborating with others. Stephanie kind of alluded to this earlier. There's so many organizations doing great work, and they all have different strengths. So when you collaborate with others, you don't have to do it all, right? The Children's Campaign has the data piece covered, so that's one less thing for the rest of the early childhood worlds worry about, you can really hone in on your area of expertise or where you think you can have the greatest impact, and rely on other organizations or other partners to fill in gaps that might be there, and need to be filled. And I think for me the most important really is to find what you enjoy doing. I personally really loathe doing canvassing, going door to door to talk to people about an issue. It makes me want to cry, but there's other aspects of advocacy that I really enjoy doing, like doing trainings on how to speak up with legislators, or I'm fine with phone banking. So the best way to be an effective advocate is to figure out kind of what you're good at and what you enjoy, and use that as your entry point rather than trying to force yourself into something like canvassing that makes you hate the work and makes you never want to speak up. So I'm starting to wrap up. I wanted to share some resources. This is obviously kind of just a very broad view of advocacy and the issues related to it. For more information about lobbying versus advocacy, the Alliance for Justice is a great resource, and really breaks it down more precisely. I think one issue around this is that it's a legal issue. So advocates like myself are a little bit hesitant to say, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do, because I'm not a lawyer. I haven't been trained, as deeply in the issue. Similarly, I mentioned the Colorado Nonprofit Association has some public policy resources as well. As we move into the legislative session, the next slide has some sites you probably want to bookmark so you can follow the legislative process, because it is kind of complicated. So there's the website where you can learn what bills are pending, see when they're going to be heard, and when you have an opportunity to speak up, figure out which legislators serve on what committees, so oh, I really care about health, so I need to go talk to these certain leaders, and you have contact information for all legislators. Legislators prefer to hear from the constituents who live in their districts, but when they're serving in a committee role, they have a broader interest. So contacting someone from the health committee is important, even if they're not your assigned legislator, because of the broader role they play within the House or Senate on that issue. To identify elected officials at all levels, you can use Vote Smart, and then there's a couple of sites where you can actually observe by listening or watching legislative proceedings. It can be a little painful, but if you can't, especially if you can't be at the Capitol, this is a great way to keep up with what's happening, hear some of the arguments that are being made, and try to identify new ways to engage and speak up. Some social media resources. This is one of my responsibilities at the Children's Campaign, and I think we, see kind of probably mixed results. Sometimes social media can really be quite effective in getting people to be more aware of issues, and can kind of, with viral type campaigns, can really start to create some noise. Other times, it may just be a way to feel like you're speaking up or contributing to an effort without having to do too much work. One thing that I can email to Hannah to share with you is a list of activities ranging from kind of low intensity to high intensity. So depending on our workload, depending on the issue we're talking about, depending on any number of factors, you may be able to have some really low impact or low time commitment activities like making a phone call, or if it's something you're working more deeply in, it could be more intensive, like launching a campaign to get paid family leave, or creating an organization or a partnership to reach a common goal. But like I said, social media is one of the kind of easier, lighter touches that doesn't take a whole lot of time and effort necessarily, but can have an interesting impact. So I use canva.com to create images like the ones you see here. people love pictures, so being able to integrate pictures into what you post on social media is really important. Nonprofit Tech for Good, or nptechforgood.com, is a great site if you want to stay up to date on the latest. I think one thing about social media is it's always changing, and as soon as we think we know something about it, the rules change or the perspective changes, and all of a sudden we don't know what's going on. So staying up to date and building skills is really important. And then you can use something like Hootsuite or Sprout Social to schedule posts and collect data about, how many people liked your post, how many people retweeted it. And I think especially if you don't have a person who can be assigned to this part-time, being able to schedule things weeks or months in advance can kind of take that off your plate, make you, ensure that you're speaking up on different campaigns or different awareness weeks without requiring you to be sitting at your computer all the time getting ready to post something. So the next slide is about our day at the Capitol. I would be remiss if I did not encourage you all to attend that, and I'm sure there's many of you on the phone who have attended in the past. For 2016, we're going to hold the event on Wednesday, March 16th. And just a little kind of overview of the day. We start with some encouragement from legislators on how to be an effective legislator. How to be an effective advocate. They help to humanize legislators. I think it can sometimes seem intimidating. We know these are elected officials. They're so important. They're working at the Capitol. So seeing firsthand that legislators are just normal people like you and I can help reduce some of the anxiety. We'll have some debrief on probably 2 to 3 early childhood and child health issues that we'll be encouraging everyone to talk about at the Capitol that day. So we'll pick 3 bills that are the most timely, the most important, the most probably most likely to succeed, and give you training on that. We give people some time to gather in small groups to prepare for their legislative visits, so they can be ready to go across the street and meet with a legislator. We also assign advocacy coaches, someone who's more experienced to kind of hold your hand through the process because it can be intimidating and it is kind of its own culture that isn't like anything else. And then a new addition we're having this year is after lunch we'll be doing some skills building sessions. So if you're someone who has done a little bit of advocacy but wants to learn more in depth about social media or working with the media, we're working to identify some breakout sessions where you can get a little bit more in-depth skills building in addition to the lobbying training that happens that day. So we have a date, we're still working, it'll be 2016, early next year when we have registration open. So that's the close of my piece. I'm happy to answer questions now, or it sounds like we have time at the end. Staying up to date with the Children's Campaign is easy through our Kids Flash newsletter. I hope you all have bookmarked and use often the data center, the Kids Count Data Center, because it gives you some great, more personalized data about your communities that you can use for grant reporting or other purposes, advocating on issues. And then these are the 2 places where you can follow the Children's Campaign on social media.
Awesome, thanks, JC, and to everybody who kind of loves this presentation but wants to dig deeper. Speak Up for Kids Day is a really great way to go that next level with your advocacy, but like JC said, kind of in a safe space where the great people at the Colorado Children's Campaign and their partners kind of hold your hand through it and get you helping practice and learn to skill build before perhaps before you go out and do it on your own. So the partnership, the Early Childhood Colorado Partnership, will make sure to share that information as soon as we have it on registration and everything with everybody in early 2016. So, so thanks, JC, and we can definitely pause right now and see if anybody does have any questions. As I said earlier, we'll keep everybody muted just because with lots of people on a webinar, it's hard to mitigate background noise and everything. But if you have a question, just enter it into your question box. You should have a little question option on your dashboard. And you can enter those ongoing, and we'll make sure we have a couple minutes at the end to answer any of them But if anybody has any now, you can feel free to put those up. But thank you so much, JC. That was super helpful, and super interesting. So for everybody who's also interested in, I know there's always people who are asking, you know, will we get this PowerPoint, and we'll make sure we send the PowerPoint out to everybody. So all those great links and resources she shared, you can easily access those as well. So at this point, I don't see any questions, so we might go ahead and move on to Sarah Barnes. She's a policy analyst at the Children's Campaign, and as many of you know, the state legislative session will be starting up in earnest starting in January, and it goes through May. And so she's going to share a little preview of some of the things to come for young children in Colorado in the upcoming legislative session. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Sarah. And then any questions during Sarah's presentation we'll leave for the end, and leave a few minutes at the end. So go for it, Sarah.
All right, thanks, Hannah. So yeah, I'll just give an overview today of a few of the policy opportunities that we're pursuing or exploring here at the Children's Campaign that are connected to early childhood, and I'll also try to give some sort of budget context and updates as it relates to early childhood as well. I'll start with a few different policy opportunities we're exploring around child care assistance in some different areas. So the first is around access to child care assistance in the Colorado Child Care Assistance Program, or CCAP as it is on the slide. So currently, government regulations in nearly every county in Colorado require that any applicant for CCAP, so child care assistance, including teen parents and domestic violence survivors, they have to engage in child support enforcement, so they have to agree to cooperate with the county's efforts to collect child support from the non-custodial parent before they can access CCAP dollars. There is a current statute that includes a waiver from these requirements, but to get this waiver is a pretty burdensome process. And so this requirement that says that a teen parent or a domestic violence survivor has to cooperate with child support enforcement in order to access child care assistance is a huge barrier, and it often causes teen parents to choose to drop out of school to work or care for their child. And for a domestic violence survivor, it can be requiring them to choose between their family safety and their child's ability to provide quality care for their child. So, and one more statistic is that 30% of teenage girls who drop out of school cite pregnancy and childbirth as the #1 reason for having to drop out of school and work. So we're working to change this at the Children's Campaign, and we're working to remove the requirement for teen parents and domestic violence survivors to have to engage with child support enforcement in order to be able to access CCAP. We believe it should be a choice. So a teen parent or a victim of domestic violence can choose to opt in to participating in child support enforcement, but we don't believe that it should be a condition of that parent being able to access CCAP. We do have some information on this particular policy opportunity that we're pursuing that I'd be happy to have Hannah send around after the call as well if people be interested in seeing that. The second policy opportunity that we're exploring around child care assistance is for foster and homeless children. And we're in the process of exploring opportunities where we can advocate for policy change to make it easier for parents of foster children and homeless families to access child care assistance, so again, CCAP. So a few possibilities here. We could think about giving counties an option to waive the eligibility requirements for CCAP for these families, or we could also create some type of categorical eligibility for these populations. We're still in the beginning stages of exploring what this policy change could look like, and definitely can provide updates as if anything moves forward on that front. And then the last piece I'll talk about here around CCAP is around expanding the cliff effect pilot program that currently exists in CCAP. And this is actually a bill that came out of the Early Childhood School Readiness Legislative Commission, which is a group of legislators that meet out of session and specifically around early childhood issues. And they moved forward this past summer, one of which is a bill to eliminate this 10-county limit. So this pilot program that exists in CCAP was established in 2013, and it allows counties to participate in a program that can help eliminate the effect of the cliff effect for families who are eligible for CCAP, and then their income level goes up a little bit, and suddenly they go off the cliff and they're not eligible anymore. So it allows counties to participate in a pilot program that instead would allow those counties to increase rates over a period of time slowly to make it easier for the family. So the way that the rule is currently written, this pilot program participation is limited to 10 counties. And this bill that has been proposed by the Early Childhood School Readiness Commission would eliminate that 10-county limit. It would also allow counties to participate in the pilot program for less than 2 years, which is the current requirement. So counties could sign up for the pilot program and could choose to participate for 1 or 2 years instead of having to participate for 2 years. And I would just note that this bill was also supported by the Early Childhood Leadership Commission as well. So that bill will be moving forward in the session. So the next slide. So now I just want to talk about a few policy opportunities specific to children's mental health. And the Children's Campaign, as a member of the All Kids Covered Coalition, as well as Clayton Early Learning and Children's Hospital and the Civic Canopy, we had a policy summit around children's mental health and had attendees come from early childhood and the health communities and spent some time thinking about policy barriers and challenges around children's mental health, as well as some potential solutions to some of those policy barriers. And so we're in the process post-summit of sort of summarizing and distilling the themes that came out of that summit to think about what the next steps should be in terms of stakeholder engagement in developing a policy agenda around children's mental health. And we're reaching out to attendees of the summit and other stakeholders to get them hopefully involved in developing that policy agenda and thinking about what those next steps should be, and thinking about sort of the short, immediate term and also mid-term and long-term a little bit further down the road. One sort of immediate policy opportunity that I wanted to talk about for a minute around children and children's mental health is in the Accountable Care Collaborative, and this is our state's Medicaid delivery system. So most Medicaid clients in Colorado are enrolled in the Accountable Care Collaborative, and the Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing runs the Accountable Care Collaborative, and is currently in the process of redesigning the program because the contracts are going to be expiring. They're going to be redoing them to launch in 2017, and so as part of that process, they're also thinking about how they can redesign the program and make it work better for our clients. And so as part of that process, the Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing is convening a number of stakeholder forums because they want to get input from a variety of stakeholders about how the next phase 2 of the ACC should be designed. I put the website here on the slide where you can go to see the schedule of those stakeholder forums and also see a lot of background information about both the Accountable Care Collaborative and also the department's vision for phase 2 and what they are thinking that will look like. And we are really encouraging people who are able to go to the stakeholder forums and offer a perspective of children and families, and how children should be remembered specifically in the way the ACC is designed. There are almost 500,000 children enrolled in the Accountable Care Collaborative. So they make up a large portion of the clients in the ACC, and we want to make sure that as the department is thinking about how to design the next phase to provide physical and mental health care for kids and for families, that there are lots of stakeholders at those forums who can help them remember to think about kids when they are designing the next phase of the ACC. So that's sort of an immediate policy opportunity around children's mental health, and we'll definitely keep you posted on other policy opportunities that are actionable as we start to develop that agenda. And so now I just want to give a quick, a little bit of budget context and then talk about a few different budget items. So in November, the governor submitted his budget proposal to the State Joint Budget Committee, who will then start, kicks off the budget process for this next fiscal year. The Joint Budget Committee has already started to meet with each of the departments and agencies to go over their budget requests for the next year, and then in March the Joint Budget Committee will start their figure setting process and coming up with our budget for fiscal year 2016 and 17. As many of you probably know, we're facing some pretty serious budget constraints as a state this year. Our economy has in large part recovered well from the recession, but we're still facing a situation where we're having to make cuts in some of our programs. The governor's budget proposal includes $370 million in cuts, including cuts to K-12 education, cuts to provider rates across the board by 1%, and a decrease in the hospital provider fee, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. The governor's budget proposal also includes required amount of $280 million in TABOR rebates that we're going to be required to give back to taxpayers this year. So then I'll talk about just a couple specific items that are included in the budget proposal. The first one is out of CDPHE, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, the Family Planning Program. The governor's budget proposal does include a request from CDPHE for $2.5 million to expand the family planning program, and this includes providing access to long-acting reversible contraceptives, or LARCs, to low-income women. Some of you may remember last year there was a bill that failed in the legislature to expand this program. This year, the request is coming back as a budget item, so the advocacy around this issue this year will look a little bit different than it did last year. We'll be working along with a coalition of organizations that worked together on this issue last year to make sure that this item is included in the budget as it moves forward through the budget process. And then lastly, I'll just talk a little bit about the hospital provider fee, which is a sort of a complicated program that we have in our state that is of an amount of money that's collected and placed into a special fund, and it allows us as a state to draw down matching funds from the federal government, and this money helps us to pay for health care for some of our most vulnerable populations. The hospital provider fee is not part of our general fund, so it's not money that's in the general fund that can be used in that way, but the hospital provider fee does count toward our limit for hitting the TABOR cap. So there's been some talk about that a way to free up space in our budget, specifically thinking about TABOR, would be to take the hospital provider fee and convert it into what's called an enterprise. And what that means is that you sort of move it out from under the TABOR calculation in the general fund, which would free up some of that space in the budget, prevent us from hitting the Tabor cap, and hopefully free up some other money in our budget to be able to use for some of these other programs. We do have some other examples of enterprises in our state already. There's a few examples in higher education, so it's been done before, and this is something that folks are talking about as one solution to sort of our budget constraints in our state this year, is thinking about moving the hospital provider fee to an enterprise to create some more of that flexibility in our budget. So I will stop there. I'm happy to take any questions, and then also happy to follow up with people on any of the items I talked about today. If you're interested in learning more about any of those things, you can see my email and phone number on the screen, and then I also included Bill Jagers, our Vice President of Early Childhood Initiatives. His information is included there as well, and you are welcome to reach out to either one of us with any questions or follow-up or requests for more information.
Great, thanks, Sarah. And if people do have questions, we're going to keep everybody on mute, but put your questions into the question box in the chat box, and we can answer your questions. And while a couple questions might come in, one thing I wanted to ask you, Sarah, is how can people continue to stay updated during the legislative session? I know a lot of us are specifically interested in issues related to kids, and so how does the Children's Campaign keep people updated ongoing during the legislative session, and of bills coming up and ways to contact legislators about specific legislation and that kind of thing?
That is a great question, Hannah. So during the session, there's a couple ways you can stay updated. If you are not already a Kids Flash subscriber, you can go to our website and sign up to receive our weekly Kids Flash email. And during the legislative session, we have something in there called a Capital Update. And on a weekly basis, we update on legislation that we're following that is specific to kids, and we'll update you on sort of the status of that legislation and things that you need to know about it. And then we also do some more in-depth stories about issues that are coming up during the session that are important to kids. And then in addition, if you're signed up, you will also receive action alerts from time to time. So if there's a specific item that there's an opportunity to take immediate action on, you'll get an action alert and have an opportunity to contact your legislator or take some other type of action that can help you stay up to date on some of those immediate opportunities. And then if you're not following the Children's Campaign on Twitter and Facebook, you should do that as well, because you will also see updates from JC on sort of up-to-the-minute social media. Those are some really good ways to stay connected.
Awesome, thanks. Yes, Kids Flash is an amazing resource, especially during legislative session, but year-round, for getting ongoing updates about kids. And in the partnership, we have several advocacy and policy organizations involved, or organizations doing policy and advocacy. I know Children's Hospital has a great advocacy arm as well that also provides ongoing updates similar to Kids Flash. They have an advocacy kind of newsletter, an update that they send out. We also have other groups like 9 to 5, who's more, if you're looking more for family-friendly policies and those types of policies, another great group to follow. But there are lots of different advocacy organizations out there focused on kids, and Kids Flash is just a great resource to hear a lot of those ongoing updates about kids. So it looks like at this point we don't have any questions from the audience. We have a quiet audience today, but we'll end the webinar here, and we will continue to have Lunch and Learn webinars throughout 2016 as well, and we'll get this ongoing schedule out to everybody. There'll be different topics that can help us highlight partners that we're working with, and different subject areas that people are interested in that we can't always cover at a regular partnership meeting. And so these are great opportunities to engage and and hear about what partners are doing. So thanks so much to Sarah and to JC for sharing information. We will be sharing the recording of today's webinar along with the PowerPoint and other resources that were mentioned during the webinar. I'll share a link to KidSplash so you can quickly link and sign up for KidSplash if you're not already. But thanks to everybody for joining, and thanks to Sarah and JC. Have a good afternoon and happy Colorado Gives Day. Hope you're giving to your local nonprofit.
Thanks, Anna.
Thanks, Anna.